of the discussion is perfectly finished, because William Mazocco has given a summary of history, of the Soviet economic propaganda and policy, which is absolutely objective, incomplete. I can add you, I've written myself 3 books more on the same subject. So no discussion. What Mazocco has said was and is still in part now the policy, economic policy of the Soviet Union. We are already in the second part, and we have another 3/4 of an hour perhaps to go, because there are 6 now who have said already, where do we go from here? And the last one, Current and the other gentleman, how do we institutionalize something better than communism? Well, I will ask you to discuss and to disagree on the following thesis, which a collection of theses, which are in a Thomistic way, I say in one sentence instead of in a sermon of an hour and a half. There are several theses. First, the one that a peasant boy of a poor peasant family has launched in the world, and that is now becoming the common consent of humanity. And that man was called Johnny, and the man who helped to write it was with myself, my professor of International University, Pavan, who is the first professor of social ethics who has refused to be a bishop, said cardinal or nothing. So in all history now, the writer of Mater Magistra is a cardinal equal to the other cardinals, but never will be a bureaucrat bishop or not even an archbishop. Well, the central principle of Parliamentaries, which I must tell you, was written at our request of Prodeo, with our people, and written by my professor, was finished after we had won the battle against Khrushchev, and after on the phone I had convinced him personally to take back the ships, humiliation, etc., etc., and you can read that in the newspapers and in many books, also the book of Flamini, of Time magazine, of Norman Cousins, etc. And then I sent Norman Cousins, who is not a Catholic, not a Protestant, not a Jew, because I never send anybody to Russia who is not an atheist, officially. Because when they see anything that Roman color and rest, they say, you come to proselytize and convert me. So Norman Cousins did not convert anybody, but went to Khrushchev with, before the encyclical was published in Latin and in English and in French, with the Russian translation of the encyclical Parliamentaries. Had a whole day with Khrushchev. Khrushchev read it, loved it, and signed it, I agree. And we have, there are 2 copies inside, 2 copies in Russian. We have a copy of that, signed Khrushchev. Why? Because the central theme of the new era is, expressed by Pope Dionys and by Pavan and myself, ideologies are systematic ideas for action which get printed. And once they are printed, they are dead. They can't change anymore. They're fixed. But the peoples are not printed, are not dead, and change. So our problem is, as the premise, is it possible that accepting everything that Moscow has said of the past, that the new man, Gorbachev, who never was a Stalinist, who was not educated, indoctrinated, might succeed in 30 years in doing what his people want, change the society. People change, ideologies don't change. Second principle. The Marxist Leninist ideology, and mainly the manifesto, is by some Americans and some Frenches considered as something serious, is considered by all the authorities of the Soviet Union absolutely ridiculous. And I quote, I travel very much. I don't go to the Soviet Union because the Soviet Union, if they see my Roman color, I'm invited twice a year to speak in the Academy of Science, Peace Committee, Institute of Social Science, etc. If I give that speech, they use me as a propagandist to say, you see that the Vatican is right. As Chancellor of a university, I come from Rome, ergo, I canonize the communist system. I always said atheists. Linus Pauling, I said Linus Pauling lately, he's an atheist too. I said Karl Rosin, he's an atheist too. I never said a Catholic, nor a Protestant, etc. And I never go myself, and I refuse to go, notwithstanding continual insisting invitations. Now, I make the people come where I can meet them. They love to come to Vienna, that's nearby. We have a federation of University Quest for Peace. That means all the presidents, chancellors, vice chancellors, and rectors of universities of the whole world, including the Chinese, who meet, not politically, and generally in Vienna, and the Russians come in hordes. Naturally, 100 rectors with 100 spies. Each rector has a spy to report what he says. 200 Russians, but then also 30 Chinese and 20 Japanese, altogether 600 people of all races.
I thought spice was the plural of spouse.
And with experience to know that conventions have no use at all. When you listen to the speeches, you can read them later, but have the use to make secret conventions after and during the speeches in a corner that there is nobody else, or at night 12 o'clock. So at 12 o'clock, knowing that the spy is snoring, I go to the room of the rector of Lumumba University, of Kiev University, of Sofia University, and he knows I'm coming. And he's in pyjama, and I'm not in pyjama naturally, but he's in pyjama. I say, look, there is no listening, there is no tape recording here. He says, I'm so glad. And then the first thing he says, Father Morlion, please cease saying that Marx is a great man. Your Samizdat, the dialectics of coexistence, is going around in Poland and Czechoslovakia, Russia, and you make an awful error in admiring Marx. We all agree Marx is outdated, was a poet, but an awfully bad economist and a stupid politician. And I say, no, I don't give in. He was a great Jewish prophet, like Isaiah and atheist. You can be an atheist prophet. There are many atheist prophets. Nietzsche is also a prophet, and a very
His
great.
grandparents were rabbis.
Nietzsche has converted me to the Catholic faith when I was atheist. I'm converted by a so-called atheist prophet who said that we were guilty in having killed Christ. You remember? God is dead, but we killed Christ and we're guilty. Now, second thesis then, the Russians themselves don't believe in their own ideology. Third thesis, I have naturally, after the phone call with Khrushchev and getting those ships back there, discovered that Khrushchev said, but Father Morley, I understand it very well, and I take back the ships, because I had told him, Khrushchev, I must, Nikita, through translation, it was no Russian, it was Shumenko, there is a secret influence that nobody knows. You might know him, you're very wise. But don't you think that Arbatov and don't you think that Alexandrov and Zhukov are the main men? Since 30 years, the grey eminence is called Shumenko, and he's not known. Officially, he is the editor of the Labor Union newspaper, Truth. Very dear friend of mine. He was the one who did my job. to get Khrushchev on the phone in 1 minute on the phone. And Khrushchev said, when I had explained to him, Jack Kennedy has told us that he can't back down, and you heard it on television because he had said television, if the ships cross the line, I will have to retaliate. And there will be 1,200,000,000 dead in the first week. And that's objective truth, the scientific. Now, Mr. Nikita, Hitler only killed 60 million. That's all. And Stalin only killed 40 million because Stalin didn't make the war. Hitler made the war. Do you want to be the greatest criminal in history for having killed 1,200,000,000? And furthermore, do you think that it is right to prefer an ideology above the life of your wife and woman, because you will be killed too. Your woman or children, you will be killed too. And he answered exactly, without any, but Father Morlion, don't you know I've been educated in the seminary? And I became a communist because my brother, who was in the same seminary, by a spy of the Tsar, who was a priest, because the Tsar used the priests as spies, has been accused of being against the Tsar, and they finally killed him. And then I became a communist. So, I understand very well that you must prefer life above ideology. And I will take back the ships immediately. So, there is in the third thesis, in the communist Soviet Union, the human nature that is stronger than the ideology. And ideology is withering away. Fourth, after the seven, but I finish. After all these things, amongst thousands of meetings, I go to dinner, to their lunch, and to meetings with Dobrynin at least 3 times a year because he called me to say I had Khrushchev on the phone, and he has agreed to your request to liberate that bishop of Ukraine, Slipoy, you know, the man who was in prison for 19 years. He has agreed. But where do we send him? And Khrushchev has taken his own tailor to give him a cardinal's robe. He wasn't a cardinal, he was an archbishop. But he has given him purple robes as cardinal, but where do we send him? And I phoned the Vatican, we sent him to Vienna by train, and then Monsieur Willebrands took him up and brought him to a little city where there were no journalists to interview him, etc., etc. So now, in that discussions with regular discussions with Dobrynin and with all his staff, including now the latest, one of the latest, on Christmas evening, I have invited the man of the, I don't give his name, of the embassy, not Dobrynin, to a Christmas dinner in a Christian family. And it was a Christian family dinner, Christmas.
This year?
After 3 hours. Well, this year.
Oh, that was before.
In the house of David Wade. After 3 hours of discussion after the dinner, I said, but look, United Peoples, the official spokesman of the new Minister of Foreign Affairs, his name is Vladimir Semayko, has written me an article, and you have it here, you have it in the United Peoples, number 12, and the son of the head of state, Anna Tromiko, who's a very dear friend of mine, has also written me an article. And in those articles, there's not a word about ideology, about Marx, and on the contrary, there are circulated quotations from the Bible, from the English mystic Donne, who's a great poet, as you know, and a story of St. Augustine that I, as theologian, have never read. Where have I found that story? So, what do you think about the situation? He said, but nobody believes in communism anymore. The family is sacred. It's in the family that the people live. And not, they have to lie the whole time. They have to say, everyone, in publicly, I'm an atheist. But more than 40% of the Soviet citizens are very religious. And the proof is that 120 million, according to the law, sign a paper, I want my church, in an atheist church. 60 million not Orthodox, 5 million Catholics, 3 million Jews, 2 million regist Protestants, and 50 million Muslims. There are more religiously committed people in the United States than there are in America.
So
that's what Dobrin tells me. So just wait a little bit. We're changing. Now that man, number 2, I wanted to find out if he was the same kind of guy, because Dobrin says to me, look, I went I went for a weekend with the head of state, and because he is very clever, he's made friends with Gorbachev 10 years before he was boss, because he knew he was going to become boss. He's now the most important friend of Gorbachev. And after the summit, he came to Washington, and then flew back to Gorbachev to tell him certain things that I told him to tell him. He said, the Sam family is sacred, and in the family, nobody believes in Marx and Lenin. They believe in their family tradition, in the Holy Mother Russia. Because they believe in the Holy Mother Russia. A long story. Read it in number 13.
Without borders.
Read it in number 13 of United Peoples.
Go beyond
Holy Mother Russia. You have no idea how holy Russia is. The third Rome. Now, that second man in that Christmas dinner, I said, look, that's sort of girl. He cites the Bible, but he says, and he's the number 2 man. I read the Bible every evening. So ergo, there is no more domination of the ideology. 5 and 6 and 7 are more important, and I'm very sure much shorter. 5. As this discussion was going internally, I made a scandal. The Dartmouth conferences are founded by an atheist, Mr. Norman Cousins, for private citizens. You've heard about the Dartmouth conferences? With private citizens, so-called private citizens, it means people who may not be government officials, and they meet every year, etc., etc. It's in the Dartmouth conference that I got Shoemaker to call, on 62, to call, to get their ships back. But then I went back in 72, and I made a scandal. I said, now look, you Americans, don't you think that you can run the world? All people are equal except the Americans. You're very different. And that was against David Rockefeller, and against Sonnenfeld, and against many important generals, Snowcroft and all the rest. But then I said the same thing to the Russians, to Arbatov, Shoemaker, and etc., etc. You cannot run the world either. Between brackets, the Americans know very well that they are only the best sons of the Europeans. Adenauer, the old fox who was president of my Institute of European Studies, says the Americans are the best Europeans, because Europe was going very badly, and the best men escaped to make a new state, and it worked out all right. Don't you think that we Europeans could also be important in the world? So let's have a trilateral private. And they said yes, in your university, International University of Rome, in 73. Brezhnev put on his budget enormous sums for first-class hotels of 12 professors who would come to my university together with the French and the Italians, etc. But I said, oh no, first decide what we're going to speak about, like you do in your meetings. So we had 3 meetings, three emissaries come from it. I said, let's talk about management. I want to talk about your idea too. And no, that's dangerous. I go back. I couldn't say anything else, and then it's later, go back and made my second proposal. Let's talk about education. Second mission, that's dangerous. No. Third, let's talk about robotics and the third world revolution. No, that's dangerous. I found out that the Russians want to this university, interdenominational with Buddhists and We are not a Catholic university. We have 55 nations and more blacks and whites, more blacks and yellow and whites, and more Buddhists and Confucians and Hindus, etc., than Christians.